The FPL game is live once again for another season, and we are back with a early first draft with some ideas on how we might start the season and some big decisions going to be made now that all prices are revealed, and the likes of Haaland being the most expensive player ever in FPL. We've got Cole Palmer getting the biggest price increase ever seen in FPL, and across the board, a lot of last season's good top scoring players have all had big price jumps. So it's going to have to make you have some sacrifices. We're not going to be able to sit here with a threemium, I think, anymore, certainly if you've got Haaland in your side. But let's take a look at my early first draft going into the start of the season. Now, I will explain as well, because my bench has a couple of defenders too, and some of the reasons behind my thinking and ideas. So first off, you can see Flecken is in goal here. Now, I know Brentford don't have a particularly great start to the season in terms of fixtures, but I do have the Chelsea goalkeeper Petrovic on my bench, and I know there's a little bit of not controversy, but some people don't like to rotate keepers. I personally do, especially at the start of the season. I like to have two starting goalkeepers because you just don't know what surprises are going to come up. And with the Chelsea goalkeeper, Petrovic was the number one at the end of last season, but there's some rumblings that Sanchez might be back in between the sticks. And I do like the idea of a Chelsea goalkeeper. And now with the idea that we can have 5 free transfers stacked up, it might not be as less valuable before using a transfer and a goalkeeper a few weeks down the line. So I will be looking at preseason to see where Chelsea are going with that. But I like the rotation between Chelsea and Brentford. And I like the idea of 2 starting 4.5 million goalkeepers to start the season with, because my biggest advice and something I will take on to start a season with is I'm going to be starting with more stable players, a more solid start. Too many times I've had bad starts to a season because I've gone for a new player to the league, or someone who, you know, they've had a bad injury like Nkunku, and then I'm thinking they're a quality player, and then the next season they just get injured again. I'm going to start with a more solid roster of players that I think are more stable, and I think Flecken and then looking at another 4.5 million goalkeeper to rotate with, I think is a good idea. Now, one who is not in there, who might surprise you, is Leno. And that's just because I think the sale of Palhinha is such a big loss to Fulham that I don't even think defensively I'm put off Fulham, despite the good fixtures and despite the good rotation they've got. I think with Crystal Palace, I don't know what this Fulham side is going to be capable of without a world-class ball-winning midfield, which Palhinha is. Moving on to the defense, and you can see right now it is a Newcastle defender, 4.5 million. Again, a lot of these players, we're going to have to wait for preseason to see if they hold on to their starting 11. You know, Livramento could be put there at left back with Trippier at right back. I don't feel as though I want to splash out. Basically, my entire defense is 4.5 million rotation defenders. I've seen a lot of people start the likes of Pedro to save money up front. But I just think, remember, last season, defenders were not particularly valuable. They didn't earn a lot of points. We've still got perhaps like an extra 10 minutes of game time at the end of game, so that's another 10 minutes of trying to keep a clean sheet. Clean sheets just felt few and far between last season, so I think I'm going to start the season with solid defenses worth 4.5 million that I can rotate for higher clean sheet odds. But Burn is in at the moment. If he keeps his slot in Newcastle or a top 8 side, and they've got a nice start of the season against Southampton, Bournemouth, Wolves and Fulham, I think is pretty decent. And these guys rotate pretty well. And you have Mikalenko. I'm surprised he's 4.5 million. Now, he's 0.5 million cheaper than Branthwaite and Tarkowski, and he's a more attacking player at wing-back. Usually in FPL, you want an attacking fullback over a centre-back. Everton, Pickford was the highest point goal scorer, and I think he was Golden Glove winner. They got a lot of points, but remember, Mikalenko was injured for a few games, and he's not finished that far behind. I don't think Branthwaite and I don't think Tarkowski are 0.5 million more worthy than this player here. And again, my entire backline, I feel like they rotate in and out really, really well with each other, and he's 4.5 million, so he's really, really nice and cheap. Now, this one might come as a surprise due to the fact that Man United were letting shots on target and shots in the box and whatever. They were like defensively the worst. But this man is back in the side. They've just signed a young wonder kid. I'm not going to pretend I know much about Euro, but they've brought him in, big price, big reputation. A lot of big clubs wanted him, but this is the man. I think that if he comes back into that Man United side, it's really going to help. He's just had a really good Copa America champions again with Argentina, and he's really solid. I think with him back in the back line, it's really good. And again, I'm looking at rotating my defenders for the good fixtures. In United, you can see Fulham in the first game, and they've got Southampton and Palace in the first 5. Teams who I feel comfortable with my defense against their attack. Moving on to the midfield, it is Starboy Saka, up to 10 million. I'm not seeing him in as many drafts as I thought I would, considering I think he was the 4th top scorer in FPL last season. I don't have any Arsenal defenders. That's mainly not just due to the price of him being 6 million, and I was quite interested in Riot 5.5, but I just felt like the opening 8 fixtures, they've got some pretty difficult clean sheet potential fixtures, in my opinion, that I think that they can concede goals. Now, Arsenal do last season by far have the best defense, but with the prices now 1 million, 1.5 million more than they were that last season, I just feel as though I'm not too ready to start the season. Again, with the idea that you can roll transfers, if I start with a really solid, stable squad that I kind of feel will play, and they don't have a lot of new managers, or there's not been a big change up, we can maybe continue from what they did the season before, then after a few game weeks, I can build up my free transfers and move these around. So I could sell Saka to an Erdegaard and bring in a Gabriel or Saliba. So I do think the idea of having these 5 free transfers, start the season really stable with boring staple players who you pretty much know will start and will be key for their sides, in good sides that haven't had a big shake-up. And, you know, you don't get a lot more stable than Saka, right? Because he's a top scorer. He's vital to Arsenal. Arteta plays him unless he's really, really injured. And I think defensively, Arsenal fixtures aren't fantastic, but they can score against anyone because they're probably going to be chasing the title this season. Going on to my midfield, and here we have Gordon, 7.5 million, I think is a great price. Similar to what I said to Burn, opening 5 fixtures are really good. And from an attacking point of view, I just feel as though those 5 fixtures are definitely something that Newcastle can get goals from. Going across to Phil Foden, another player I've not seen in a lot of squads, maybe a little bit cooler on him since his, let's say, underwhelming performance at the Euros, and the fact that they start away against Chelsea in game week 1. And people maybe sacrificing Foden to get Haaland into their side. But remember, it wasn't until the second half of the season when Pep really nailed down Foden's position and Foden went on that crazy run of really, really high points. I still think for 9.5 million, I'd rather have like a Saka, Foden and my forwards compared to a Haaland where I have to sacrifice 2 of my big midfielders. And you don't get much bigger than Mohamed Salah, probably the greatest FPL asset of all time. Starts the season against Ipswich, so he's probably your automatic captain in game week 1. The idea as well, so when I said earlier about having a stable team with not many changes, yes, Liverpool have a new manager, but Salah is, you know, he's still going to be the first name of that on that team sheet. And people have been saying about how Arne Slot plays with an inside forward, so sometimes last season it felt like Salah was too far on the right wing and he wasn't cutting inside a lot. But if he plays him a little bit more narrow as an inside forward, which is basically what he plays when he's not hugging the sideline, when he tucks inside more, he's basically going to be a Mo Salah striker for 12.5 million. And he's got Brentford in game week 2, Forest. You know, look at even Manchester United historically, he's pretty good against Manchester United. So even if you take out Manchester United, you've got Ipswich, Brentford, Forest and Bournemouth in the opening 5. I just can't look past Mo for that one. And finishing off, this was Nkunku, because 6.5 million, I thought he's so talented, but again, new manager. Chelsea still have some issues that they haven't sorted out. They've got a bunch of young, talented players, but they're still not a team. Even now with the issues with the Argentinians singing and chanting with Enzo Fernandez, that's going to have friction with like 3 of his other squad mates. And I just thought, Nkunku, don't have to start with him. He's got City in game week 1, and if he gets a bit of a run under his belt and he's staying away from injuries, then I can bring him in. But why not start with Leon Bailey? He was absolutely rock hot for Aston Villa mid to end of last season. I had Diaby for a long time. It became a little bit of a meme that I held Diaby for far too long. But it looks like he could be going to Saudi Arabia, which makes Bailey was first choice anyway, but would get maybe 60, 65 minutes. Now without Diaby sort of fighting for that spot, even 60, 65 minutes for 6.5 million, I do think Bailey is worth it. And with those fixtures, despite take out the Arsenal fixture, obviously difficult for anyone, I just feel as though that this is a very, very good deal for Leon Bailey, who was really good, linked up really well, coming in from behind Watkins to go ahead of Watkins to get a lot of goals. I think he's really good value for money. And speaking of the man himself, Ollie Watkins, England hero for when he came on and scored. Sadly, we didn't make it over the line in the final, but 9 million again for... Was he one of the top scorers, and he was the most assists and so consistent throughout the season. And again, similar to what I've just said about Bailey, the opening 5 fixtures look really, really, really good for Ollie Watkins there. Again, it looks boring. These are familiar players you've seen last season. No big shake-up. Villa are improving their squad. Douglas Luiz, I think, will be a big loss, but they're going to bring some talented players in. I've got no problem with Villa. They're a team on the up. Ollie Watkins, simple choice. And finally, Isaac. I mean, again, and the issue I'm going to talk about later is I'm tripling up a little bit too much. So this could change, obviously, throughout the summer. But I'm looking at the first 5 fixtures. I'm looking at the clubs, and I'm looking at the players. And, you know, Newcastle, Villa, good managers, strong squads, good fixtures. It's difficult to look past them. Nice prices as well. And Isaac, the only question with Isaac is injuries, and to an extent, Callum Wilson, obviously always potentially coming in for him. But Isaac for me is the first choice. We've seen Wilson and Isaac as a pair up front, or sometimes if Wilson plays, Isaac will go to the wing, which is something you don't want to see. But I just feel as though to start the season with, Isaac's going to be the one there. So moving on to the people that are on my bench, you can see Petrovic is out at the minute. We have to wait for pre-season, whatever Chelsea goalkeeper looks to have taken the top spot there, because Brentford and Chelsea rotate really well. You can see Pau Torres and Anderson. So you've got Newcastle, Everton, Manchester United, Crystal Palace and Aston Villa. They all rotate really well. So for 4.5 million, I'm just going to go cheap in defence at the start of the season with staple and stable players just to rotate them in and out and go for clean sheets. And again, if it doesn't work, 3 or 4 game weeks down the line, I can take out a Saka, I can take out a Foden, I can take out a Watkins, I can take someone out and make 3 or 4 changes and really shuffle up and maybe do 2 6 million defenders in defense and play 4-5-1, something like that, right? So I just wanted to start the season with something a little bit solid, with players that you know, with clubs that you know, you kind of expect, you feel what you're going to expect. And I think there's no player apart from probably Martinez, because it's Manchester United. But again, I've got Anderson and Pau Torres. And I didn't honestly know this until I made this squad, that my defenders, they are like the highest performing defenders from last season in the 4.55 million range and down, because there just weren't a lot of points in defense last season. I would rather go a little bit heavier up front and just rotate and try and get some points from defense. Midfield, people might argue Bailey is sort of the weakness in there, but he's not really a weakness, because if he's got minutes for Aston Villa, he's a great option. But could be Nkunku, but do you want to start a season with a player who's so injury prone in a club that's still a little bit not quite got that team cohesion? I'm not 100% sure. And my final spot just was a 4.5 million forward. I mentioned earlier, I've seen a lot of 5.5 million João Pedro's in a lot of starting lineups. I had him a lot last season. For having a player when you start 11 not nailed, I don't think it's worth it. And my 2 strikers should be pretty nailed, but I would rather not have a 5.5 million forward I don't believe in. I'd rather have 2 4.5 million defenders as first and second sub that can come on with 90 minutes than a 5.5 million striker that I don't even think is going to score goals. I know people might be picking Armstrong as well, but how many goals do I think a Southampton newly promoted team striker is going to score compared to a potential clean sheet or bonus or goals from an Aston Villa top 4 defence or a Crystal Palace solid defence with Anderson and Gahey, right? So for me, 2 good strikers. 3rd striker should just be your dud spot rather than making a dud spot for a midfielder. 4.5 million midfielders probably not going to play, but 4.5 million defender, there's loads to choose from. So if you've got a full stack of 4.5 million defenders, you're always going to have 2 good subs. So let's say Isak picks up an injury, which sometimes he's prone to do. I'm okay going with Torres or Anderson in for 1 or 2 game weeks if I don't want to make that move. Let's say Isak's out for just 1 game, right? 1 week. Anderson and Pau Torres comes in. I play 4-5-1. I'm not bothered. I think it's fine. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this squad. Of course, it's early. It's first draft. Burn might be dropped. Salah might be playing right wing back for slot. Foden might be on the wing again for Man City. Saka might not be fit for game week 1. Of course, things could change. But the bottom line of this is it's a squad full of players that did pretty well last season and were pretty solid for clubs that are pretty good, you know, sort of top 10 clubs with good starts to the fixtures and just staple players for their sides. Like if some of these players are not starting the season for these clubs, I'd be very, very surprised. So I feel as though starting the season with not many new players into the Premier League or new players playing for a club or teams with new managers where you don't know what system they're going to play, just start with what you know and what we know now. And I think that's start solid and then improve throughout the season rather than having too many differentials, too many new players to the league, too many clubs that are changing tactic formation and things like that. Start simple, okay? Let me know in the comments below how you're feeling about the start of this FPL season and any players you think are really missing from my side that is not named Erling Haaland. So thanks for joining and I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.